name's Boyd.
2-2.
My first thought, check the
One,
phone.
2-2. 2-2.
Nothing works.
1-2.
Okay, we're live. Okay. All right, so first we're going to introduce our panelists. I'm the moderator. I'm Kyla Stone. So we're going to say our names and some of the series that we've written and how many books we
1-2.
have out.
2-2.
So I'm Kyla Stone. I am the moderator. I have 3 series, Last Sanctuary, Nuclear Dawn, and Edge of Collapse, and I have 21 books published.
I was going to say I'm Franklin Horton, but I'm not that. No. My name's Boyd. Some of the series I wrote are like the Opus trilogy, World Burns, Still Surviving. I don't honestly know how many books I got under my name.
2-2.
A couple.
I'm Franklin Horton. I have 33 written, 25 out. I have the Borrowed World series, the Locker 9 series, the Mad Mix series, and then a few other oddball things thrown in here and there.
I am Kate Pickford. I write under a pen name in a bunch of different genres. For Post-Apoc, I write for Muonic Press under J.J. Pike. And I'm sitting here frantically trying to think how many books I've got out. But as a guesstimate, a number I'm pulling out my ass, I'm going to just say 58. Oh, sorry, yes. I wrote the Melt series.
Hi, I'm Jay Falconer, despite what the sign says here, that somebody needed a spell check. I wrote the Bunker series. I think I've got 4 series out now, working on a 5th. I think it's about 18 to 20 books. I don't know exactly how many, but thanks everybody for showing up nice and early.
All right, this question is for everybody. How did you start writing in the post-apocalyptic?
So I do a lot of research, and if you're writing about a place that you really know well, you can bring nuance to it. Like Richmond, Virginia, I know well, and I know that if you go to a yard sale on the north side, it's going to be antiques, and if you go in the west end, it'll be new stuff and still in the box.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe that's why. Somebody else has it in another room.
Okay.
She's right here. I just turned 2 off.
All right, guys. How did you start writing in the post-apocalyptic genre?
I don't know. I started off writing something else, but I got into post-apoc because I like to write what I read. And I just got done binging on the Ashes series by William Johnstone, and it's more dystopian, America trying to rebuild after a big event. So I thought I'll give this a try, and I'll put a little bit of my own twist on it, and quit writing just about everything else because that took off.
I was one of those kids who grew up reading Stephen King because most of the other authors that I was exposed to as a kid were the boring guys in the tweed jackets with the little patches on their elbows. And Stephen King was the first writer who seemed to be having a really good time of it. He would come straggling out of his office with cocaine on his nose and beer cans trailing behind him. And it's like, this guy's a rock star. That's actually a cool writer instead of, the more traditional. So he made it seem like an interesting thing to do. So I was, at 13, just enamored with the idea. So I went on to get an English degree and struggled through years and years and years of trying to get published. And finally, I decided I was going to go back to the things I enjoyed the most, which were destroying the world and everybody who lived there. And so I found my way back to my first love of post-apoc, and that was life-changing.
So I grew up as an army brat, and so there's lots of war stuff around you all the time. You wake up in the middle of the night and your dad is in his gear and he's got a rifle on his back and he's leaving for however long to some other part of the world where hopefully he won't kill anybody. And we moved houses very often. In every house that we moved into, I would work out how everyone in the family would escape. And I would choose my room based on, okay, my brothers are downstairs so they can climb out the windows. My parents would be with the thing they can slide down. I will jump because I will always survive. I will always survive. And the way that I calmed myself at night was to imagine dead bodies that I had to get rid of. This was my self-calming mechanism as a child. And I would run through all the things you had to do and how you couldn't buy. This is before it was Dexter was on TV telling us how to do it. I'd already worked that fucking shit out. You have to go to You have to go to a bunch of different places to get the tarpaulin. And then you have to make sure that the woman across the road, who is the Twitchy Curtain Brigade, is out at the same time as you. And you're like, I'm going to go see the owls now. So you've always got your alibi. And it wasn't until I was in therapy in my 20s that I worked out why I was getting rid of the bodies from the earliest time that I could remember. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a very, very violent alcoholic. And my mother dreamt of killing him from her earliest days. So I grew up thinking that everybody's mother wanted to kill their father. And she had this very, very specific thing. He was a miner. They lived in a mining house. The stairs were very steep. And her fantasy, which I knew from the time I understood language, was she would tie a rope across the top of the stairs, and she would call his name, and he was a very big man, and he would fall down the stairs and break his neck, but if he didn't, she would beat him to death with a poker. And so what I worked out later in therapy was I was getting rid of the bodies for my mother.
Well, for me, it was a strange journey. I started out in time travel, and I wrote 2 series, and they weren't going anywhere. And that was after hiring a writing coach and working with her for 2 years and rewriting my first book, 4 times or something. And I was at some conference somewhere along the way trying to figure out why things weren't selling. And somebody had suggested running a book contest where you give away paperback books. So I went online and I bought, 20 of the top books that were in science fiction, and one of them was Michael Banner, M.O. Banner's book, and so I had put that in there, and I was running this contest, and out of the blue, I get this email from Mike, and somewhere along the way, he ran across this contest and reached out to me and asked me how it was going, and so we started conversing, and next thing you know, we became friends, found out we lived in the same state, we went to the same college. And then Mike suggested that I try Post-Apocalyptic. So I had a series in mind that I was going to do on weather control technology. I changed it slightly, make it more post-apocalyptic, released it a few months later, 2 books, and bingo, all of a sudden, sales. So then I decided, oh, wow, this is great. So then I came up with the Bunker series and released that, and the rest is kind of history. But if it wasn't for some random luck out in the universe, and meeting this wonderful man, Mike, and who's one of my best friends, then, who knows? I probably would have stopped writing at that point. So, thanks, Mike.
Which is why finding your tribe is so important. That's right. Good. All right, this question is for Boyd and Jay. What changes have you seen over the last 5 to 10 years in the genre? How have things changed or evolved?
I think there's a lot more politics now in post-apoc than there used to be, and that wasn't something you really saw, when I was growing up, reading The Stand, or, a lot of, nowadays, it kind of leaches into everything, and the other thing I noticed is the worse the politics in the country are and divided people get, or whether we're, in an even keel post-apoc just seems to be a growing genre, and it hasn't really slowed down.
I think the biggest change is just the sheer number of books that are being produced and the number of authors that have joined our genre. It's certainly getting more crowded, and it's getting more difficult to come up with a different spin on EMP stories and everything else. But in the end, it always comes back to the same thing, and that's great characters and struggle. So I think just the proliferation of our genre is really what's really been the biggest change, I think. Would you guys agree? Yep.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, this question is for Kate and Franklin. What do you think are the most important tropes to hit in the post-apocalyptic genre?
I think that just based on the feedback that I get specific to my series, I think people really like a good glimpse of the disaster. They want to know how your the base that you're building on. So, you know, I've tried a few different experiments with different kinds of disasters, but they really want, they don't necessarily need the lead up, because it seems sometimes if you put too much in of the prequel to the disaster, that kind of weirds them out. They just want to pick up with the fun part to them, which is when the world is destroyed and they're starting to find their way through. I think too that depending on which subgenre of post-apoc you're dealing with, there's a big difference in the expectation and what people are looking for. I write more to the prepper fiction, which is the realistic survival, the realistic weapons, the realistic preparedness, actionable information that a lot of times people can extract and apply to their own situation. In my case, people do not want zombies, they do not want magic, they do not want anything that is no aliens, nothing outside of their realm of actual physical things that they understand. So, with the preparedness, the prepper fiction, it more is the realistic. They want the practical, no aliens, nothing, just very, and that is a very distinct line in those subgenres, because the crossover just doesn't work. And sometimes people get ambitious and try to blend them, but they're just based on the reviews that I read. That's a deadly mistake sometimes.
Yeah, so I've got nothing to add.
Thank you.
So I tend to write stuff that does have pre-apoc in, so we've got the lead up. My readers tend to not prefer the prepper who is really prepped and ready for it. What they want is the ordinary Joe and Josephine, and to see them thrown into, okay, where's the water coming from? Do you know squat about how to drink? You got to drink every single day, and it can't always be whiskey. And so they really want to see the ordinary people. I feel like Post-Apoc is very much about save the cat. It's very much about chase your character up the tree and keep throwing rocks at them at every single turn. Every single time they work something out. They work out how to collect rainwater. Yay! Okay, now pollute the rainwater. So every single time they get something right, they get something wrong. And it's addictive. Later on, I'm going to talk about the brain science behind storytelling. And Post-Apoc has this built into the actual storytelling, is every single time something goes right, it goes wrong. And the stories that my readers like to read are about the resilience of the human spirit. The evil people get punished, which is very, very rewarding. You can kill them, wrap them up. I can tell you how to do that. And then the good people, not all of them survive. You do get to kill some of them. Yay! But the human spirit is the big seller for my readers.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Boyd and Franklin, are there certain apocalyptic trigger events that the readers seem to like more than others? EMP, solar flare, nuclear war, that type of thing.
I've been writing a lot about economic collapse and civil unrest, and I've got one that I'm still working on right now that's going to be essentially civil war that causes everything to go down. And what would that look like in a post-apocalyptic event?
Yeah, I tend to write about the slow decline. At the time that I released my first book, there were so many EMP books out that I didn't want to do an EMP book, and there's a certain attraction to doing EMP books because it's a very distinct line. Suddenly things are normal, suddenly things are not normal. It's a very dramatic event to write about. I think that the expectations that people are getting are changing because of the events that we've gone through over time. Experiencing more sophisticated weather events has changed what people think their own exposure to an apocalyptic event could be. More people are experiencing severe weather and realizing this could impact me in a way that it might not have years ago. I think people are also, the pandemic experience has changed people's outlook on preparation and survival. I think also the idea of apocalyptic events brought about by climate change is one of those things that over the next couple of years more people will start writing about, because we've got all the little potential places, you know, that they're saying could go underwater, could be washed away, or the severe storms or whatever. So there's just all kinds of nice events we could write about in the future. There's no shortage of gloom and doom out there.
Franklin, along the same lines, are there any niche opportunities you see that your readers have given you feedback about?
I'm not one of those people that reads reviews. I tend to watch what the reviews are averaging, but I don't like to get lost in the reviews themselves, because I think they impact how I write in the future. But I get a lot of interaction from my readers. I communicate with them a lot through email and through social media messages, and there are certain things they ask for that I just never imagine that I'll have the time to write about. But as my readers tend to be more prepared people who are reading from a mindset that they're already semi-prepared, I get people who say, well, yeah, we like these concrete preparedness series, but where are the series about people of color? Where are the series about people with autistic children who have to prepare for how they're going to handle situations with keeping the autistic child entertained throughout the apocalypse? And where are the series about people who are dealing with different medical abilities or disabilities? And you know, there's a lot of space out there for those kind of things that and it's like the difference, all of us have a different readership and a different market, but that is a huge market, and the market grows constantly, because even with, you know, a lot of people had an expectation that post-apocalyptic would die off during the pandemic because people would have enough negativity and darkness in their life, but that was not my experience. My sales did really well throughout the pandemic because more people wanted to know about possible scenarios and wanted to increase their level of preparation. So I think if I was coming into this now, there's a lot of niches that are able to be exploited.
What are some pitfalls to avoid in the post-apocalyptic genre? This is for Jay and Kate. Franklin touched a little bit about aliens, you know, and zombies aren't really in right now. But are there some other things that you absolutely do not want to do when you write in this genre?
Well, I think Franklin touched on it earlier, and Nick Thacker mentioned it yesterday in his. You certainly don't want to have any levitation ray guns or anything like that, but I kind of push the envelope, and I do include a little bit of futuristic what-if scenarios. For example, you know, what's the equipment on a cell tower, and what could it be used for nefariously? And so I like to extrapolate a little bit, and once in a while it comes true. I think we have an author in here. Annette, are you in here? Yep. She wrote the China pandemic, I don't know, what, 8-9 years ago, and so of course pretty much everything in there came true, and her life has changed a lot since that all happened. Not always in a good way, but so I think that, and I once in a while I'll throw some political stuff in there, not on purpose. It's part of society, I guess. And then I've learned that I've got to throw both sides in occasionally, because it doesn't matter what you say, you're gonna upset half the people. So even if we want to make some assumptions about our particular readership, something tend to avoid. And I've been trying to cut back on the language a little bit, you know, but still sometimes it just comes out and it needs to be in a scene. So I think you just got to walk the line there. You can tell a story without going down those paths, I think. And if you're worried about negative feedback, I mean, that's going to happen regardless, but we certainly don't need to throw gas on the fire.
So my readership do not like sex. I mean, they might like sex personally, but they don't actually want to read about it on the page. You can kill as many people as you like, in as many different ways as you like, but the minute that people get together, and you can do all the lead up, although not romance, but you can have people see each other and be like, fade to grey immediately. There is barely even a kiss, ever. So no sex, no swearing. We just have, I write for Muonic Press, and so we talk amongst ourselves about what is and isn't acceptable for our readership. We've just floated a couple of swear words. I'm really excited. We've already said no zombies, although I would say that if you haven't read Chuck Wendig's The Wanderers, it is outstanding post-apoc, and he has invented a kind of techno-zombie that is it's brilliant, brilliant writing. But for our readership, no zombies, not too far in the future, it's pretty much near time now. Very realistic, very real people, just people who don't have sex.
That's what I was going to say. My best tip ever, do not kill the dog. It will end your career. I cannot tell you how many emails I have from readers, and they're like, if you kill Ghost, I will never read you again. I was like, okay, I got it. Okay, this question is for Jay and Kate. What characteristics make up the typical post-apocalyptic reader? What's the age range, gender, what surprises?
What surprises me is how many women read post-apocalyptic. I think 60% maybe. I mean, it's hard to get the demographics right, and we can make some assumptions, but I think Franklin and I would agree it's probably women between 40 and 60 are our biggest market, I think. I certainly get plenty of email from women, and they tend to gravitate to my bunker character, and he's not exactly a good guy, but he's not a bad guy either. So I think we need to make sure that we don't just write one side of the story. We got to make sure that we cover it all. And in my last series, Silo, Boyd Craven and Franklin Horton are both in it, and neither of them are good guys, and one of them dies horribly, but you'll have to figure out which one. So.
So I love this question because people always get it wrong when you ask the audience, who do you think reads post-apoc? And they're like, boys who are 16. I'm like, no, women in their 60s. So our readership is mostly women in their 60s, and I think one of the reasons for this is that they see the world building, they see the culture building, they see the stuff that they have been doing in their lives, which is trying to keep a family unit together, trying to make sure that the children are raised properly and they are fed and they are clothed, and how do you do that? And I think it speaks, although, you know, lots of women don't do this. I myself don't have children. I've never cared about children having clothes on. So that just doesn't sound right. Oh, no. But I think that there's a reason that women in their 60s love post-apoc. Really, truly, God, I just get myself into trouble all the time. And the other thing is that for our readership, a lot of people are retired, and they are our whale readers. They read almost swore. Yes, a lot of, swear words for a lot of books, and they're always looking for more. You know, post-apoc really ranges from guns and tanks to are you growing herbs? And they split over these things. I don't know later if we'll get into, you know, the balance of plot and story and what those two things mean. But for us, older women love post-apoc.
Okay, this is for Franklin. What is one of your most successful marketing techniques?
I'm a poster child for trying stupid things. I've blown money doing crazy things over the years. In the beginning, it was about finding free ways to reach readers. So I would go through a series that I'd written, and I would try to find what towns my characters passed through, and I would send free paperbacks to libraries along the route, just as a way, sending them to the library. I wouldn't call, I would just send them and say, your town is mentioned in these books. Somebody there may give a shit, I don't know. So I would send those books. At one point, I signed up for the Newswire service. This was a tip somebody had given me. It sends press releases every day to like 4 to 5 million journalists who use it as a source of information for stories. So I would write these kind of clickbaity titles like Horton says his books could save lives. And I would write these things and they would send them out. And what started happening was I started to get requests from AM radio stations to be a guest on their talk shows. And it wasn't a lot, but I would go on Houston talk radio and I would talk about, how you could save water inexpensively so that you would have water on hand when hurricane season started and you may lose power. And I was still working my day job at that time, so I would put a sign on the door that said I was in a conference call, and I would take out little blocks of time and do these live radio interviews. Another thing I tried was I knew that I had a lot of audiobook listeners, so I started running these midnight radio ads targeting truckers so that they, I originally started to go to iHeartRadio, but their entry-level ads were too expensive. So what I found was that I could call little radio stations along interstates, and I could ask for AM ads to play overnight for people who were listening to talk radio in the middle of the night. And if I was willing to commit to like $20 a week, they would even produce the ads for me. So I would get 30-second spots in the middle of the night that were really dramatic, with doom and gloom music. And I tried that for a while. Podcasts have been a big thing too. Podcasts have been really helpful. A lot of times you have to push yourself out there and find some aspect of your story, either your personal story or the story of your books that might appeal to podcasters. And the thing that podcasters really like is to be able to do a giveaway. So if you're willing to go on their show and give away a few books, that's a big thing for them. Also recently, especially during the pandemic, I've made this offer to libraries that if you're trying to find some way through Zoom to engage your library patrons, I'm willing to come on and do 5 or 10 minutes and answer questions that people may have about the writing process and give away books. So giving away books especially is just, a good cheap way to get readers. But if it's a dumb idea, I've tried it, and every once in a while something works. But I paid $5,000 at one time to take out a magazine ad, and it did nothing. So they've not all been hits.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to have one more question and then open it up for questions from the audience. This is for everyone. What is one piece of advice you would give to new authors wanting to break into the genre?
I guess my advice is kind of general and not just post-apoc, but, writing is a marathon. It's, not a sprint. And if you don't get it right away, don't, keep going and keep writing and, keep publishing more books. And, the only way to really fail to get into the genre is just to give up. And I know a lot of people that have written, 1 or 2 or 3 books, and then, they get discouraged because they're not seeing the success they want, whatever their measure of success is. And they kind of move on, and I tell people don't give up because it took me 20 or 30 books before I finally figured out how to sell myself, how to write this in a way that readers wanted to read it, and really kind of develop. So if I would have gave up, I never would have been up here.
Yeah, just to build on what Boyd said, that was pretty much my story too. I thought getting an English degree was the magic key, and that publishers would come beat down the door and they would invite you in, and it would all be magical. But it wasn't like that, and I wrote 7 novels over 20 years that I could never even get an agent for. So I was, there were times that I would get frustrated with the thousands of rejections that were building up, and I persisted through it. And after 20 years of failing at it, finally got a good series on Kindle that worked out well for me. And it's possible, but don't get despondent over the rejections because there will be a lot of them.
So you would think for post-apoc that it is plot-driven because stuff happens, big stuff happens to your characters, and the rocks that you throw at your characters are plot pieces. But in fact, post-apoc is solidly character-driven. You absolutely need to understand the psychology of human beings, both as individual and as groups, how groups behave. If you don't do that and you only do throwing the rocks bit, you are going to be writing a disaster movie, which, great, good luck to you, but you're not going to be writing post-apoc, because post-apoc is character-driven. It's about how they respond to each of those rocks. So study character.
Well, I think you guys have pretty much covered everything, but for me, I guess I would say is network with other authors, people that might be a little bit farther ahead of you on the success scale. I mean, everybody will get there if you stick with it, but you got to put out books. I mean, it wasn't until my 8th book, I think, or 9th, I can't remember, whenever I met Mike Banner. I wasn't having any success. I was about ready to quit. And so you never know when something's going to turn. You find the right story, and it's, people always say, well, what are the secrets? There are none. It's just, you got to just keep working at it. And when you get the cover right and the story right, and if Amazon shows you some love, maybe things will take off. And that's kind of what's happened to all of us. Every once in a while, something magical happens. And if not, we put out another series, and just keep writing. But definitely network. Study what some of your favorite books are doing, outline them, just kind of get an idea of the areas of the story that you like and certain tropes that jump out at you. I mean, there's no magic formula. It's just work hard, and I've probably produced the least amount of books in here. I got a little sidetracked the last couple of years, but there's, just write. That's all you can do.
All right, guys, thank you for your excellent answers. I think this was a great panel in spite of our beginnings. We've got about 7 minutes left if we have any audience questions. So, yeah.
Other than the Army brat axe murderer up there, I know where your sources come from. I did 30 years in the military and special ops as an intelligence officer, and you guys seem to have links to military equipment, tactics, ghillie suits, Kyla. Those kinds of things stand out. And working with Hollywood, we have what we call the bullshit meter. And you guys seem to bypass all that. How do you do that? What's your link? Do you have personal relationships with military or some source you go to?
I'm an obsessive gun collector. I'm a person who owns night vision and thermal, and I'll go out at night and I'll drive with my night vision around my property because I don't have a military background, so I'm a... What state do you live in? Virginia. Yeah. But also, as I've developed a readership with military experience, I get all kinds of crazy opportunities. I've visited a lot of training facilities. I participate in a lot of training. I have a lot of military guys who act as resources and invite me to meet their friends so that they share information with me. And it's not an attempt to mine people's stories and exploit them, but an attempt to learn the techniques and the skills. And I never try to portray that I'm actually the people I write about, but I do like that they share information that helps me. And I mean, just 2 weeks ago, we had somebody in the gun industry invite me and a few other people to come shoot all their machine guns and suppressed 50 calibers and all those things, and they provided the weapons and ammunition and food. So, doors have opened that help us get that information. It's a nice side effect.
And to expound on that a little bit, beta readers are invaluable. They really are. And I will turn readers and fans into beta readers. So if they message me and say, this is my history, I served in the Marines, whatever, and I liked your book, and I'll write them back and be like, hey, do you want to be a beta reader for me? I ask you questions, you read action scenes. I'm going to do a lot of research, but having their experience, because they've been there, is invaluable to writers, because I haven't been in war. obviously. But I listen to their stories, and then I imagine what it would be like, and then I write it, and then they read it, and they say, you nailed it. And I think that's one of the most rewarding experiences of the whole process.
I figured that other writers would like to know, each of you, are you an outliner or a pantser? And then what's your typical book length?
So I do a little bit of both. Sorry. I'll write down plot points, like where I'm going to start and then where I'm going to end. Those are the first two things I do. And then I know somewhere between 1/3 to 40% in, you're going to have the big event that happens. And, you've got your build up, the event. But I don't write like a full outline. I just put like, right here. I want to have, this happen, and I don't lock myself in on how I get there. I know I want to get it there at some point, because my outlines go wildly, off in the weeds when I try to outline way too much. So I just, maybe 4 or 5 plot points, and then maybe a sentence for each chapter.
Book size?
Oh, I try to go for 75 to 80,000 words at least.
I'm a pantser who used to go for 120K was what I aimed for, but now I've realized that I'm wasting a lot of words, so I've backed it off to I shoot for 90 to 100K now, but I'm not locked into that. I don't hold myself to it.
So I am a pantser, but I was a book coach and a script doctor in a previous life. So structure is just part of my bones, and I find myself hitting what I need to hit. Probably now most of the books are between 100 and 110. Okay.
I'm a complete pantser. I start with a character and just a general idea, put them in a tough situation, and then characters come and go in the story. Some live, some die, but I build from there until I get to the point where I've got this really wide story, and I know I eventually got to get to the end of the book, so then I got to figure out how to bring it all back together, which is probably one of the harder ways to do it. But if I don't know what's coming in my stories, how are the readers ever going to know? That's I don't want it to be a stale story. So I know some people outline, but it's just not my style. There's just too many things that can pop in your head at any one time. So typical book size, it varies depending on. I'm usually around 70 to 80,000 words. First one I wrote was like 150, and then I chopped it in half and got paid twice and just put a cliffhanger in. So it was like, well, we just got to spend this time. I was and then series always seem to sell better anyway. So.
I'll answer this question too. I'm with Kate. I believe in the power of structure and giving your story the best foundation it can. So like Save the Cat, Story Engineering by Larry Brooks, Anatomy of Story by John Truby, who is here, by the way. So if you have not gone to his sessions, you should. So I do plot, but it's probably a sentence or two per chapter, because I do like to have that creativity and the unexpected and that magic, but it's within a framework that I know where I'm going. And then length is about 80 to 85,000, but I'm working towards more like 90 to 100,000 or more, and that's because of audiobooks. So if you're going to be turning your stories into audiobooks, I sat down, I had a conversation with Podium, and they have done some research, and they said books that are over 10 hours versus under 10 hours, which is right about the 90, 95,000 word mark, the ones over 10 hours sell 30% better. Because you have so many people on Audible who have the $14.99 a month credit, and if it's under 10 hours, it's like $13 or something, and so they feel like they're not getting a deal. So that over 10-hour mark is pretty critical. So I am thinking about that with every book I do from now on. So I just wanted to share that. Well, it depends how fast your narrator narrates, but for my narrator, it's about 90 to 90,000 words. Gets you over the 10-hour mark. So if you're kind of planning for that. Yep.
How often do you guys release a new story? new book?
It used to, sorry, this one's louder. All right. It used to be a lot faster for me. I was at one point going every 6 weeks with a release. In the last year, I think I've probably had 5 or 6. The last calendar year. This year, I've only got 1 out right now. So
I shoot for 5 or 6 a year. Sometimes with the holidays and the breaks that my cover designers take, it doesn't always work out. It may overflow into the next year, but 5 or 6 a year is my target.
So I know diddly about marketing, but the Amazon cliff is real. And if you want Amazon to do some of the lifting for you, you need to look at where the cliff is in your genre. It's all really about reader expectation. So whether or not you're going for rapid release and you are doing something every 6-7 weeks, or you're doing something, I don't know, if you're an idiot and you wait a year because you're me, it's just about reader expectation.
Well, outside of the last 2 years, I got sidetracked building a house and some life issues. But before that, it was 3 or 4 books a year would be a good pace for me. I have a full-time engineering job and some other things going on, and I tried quitting that for a year and thought I'd write more, but I didn't. So why not have a steady income and then take some of the pressure off? That was my decision. But 3 to 4 books a year is a good pace.
About 4 books a year. I'm not a fast writer, and for people who are fans, I'm about 6 or 7 months behind this time. So hopefully by Christmas. I think we're done. Yes. So thank you guys so much for coming so early in the morning. We really appreciate it.